This conference will now be recorded.
All right, everybody. Welcome to the Satellite Book Club Seminar Series. This is session number 133. Thanks for joining us and happy meteorological spring. The title of today's presentation, GOES-18 versus GOES-17 ABI. If you're joining us from the Western United States or possibly our OCONUS, hopefully you've noticed the improvement in the image quality throughout the year from GOES-18. Our presenter today is Matt Gunshor, a researcher from the Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies. As you might have just heard, he's presenting from the center room there of CIMSS on the second floor, which used to be where my office was when I was a grad student. So that's bringing back generally positive memories. And our facilitator today is John Bonk, meteorologist from the National Weather Service, WFO, in Portland. Glad to have him on today as well. Just a few reminders, as you heard, this session is being recorded. We'll have an opportunity for Q&A after the presentation. Please post your questions in the chat and we will field them in the order they are asked. We also encourage you to use your full name when you sign in, or specify your full name when asking a question. We realize some offices are using a general account, and that'll help us follow up if we need to. Also, if you haven't been getting your TowerS communications lately, check your spam folders. We've been told that for those with Google accounts, which is everybody with a NOAA.gov, that some of the communications have been routed into spam, and that's not where they belong. Finally, we're looking for future presenters, so please contact the TowerS team if you have something that you would like to share with your colleagues. And if you need training materials, Brian Mott at the Office of the Chief Learning Officer can help with that. I'd like to thank the TowerS team, particularly Shad Bowman and Lee Byerly, as well as the Office of the Chief Learning Officer and the GOES-R and JPSS programs for their support. Of course, also thank you to our facilitator today, our presenter, and to all of you for taking the time to join us. Without further ado, I'd like to formally introduce Matt Gunshor, who's a researcher at the University of Wisconsin-Madison's Cooperative Institute for Meteorological Satellite Studies, where he has worked since 1997. He has a bachelor's degree in ocean engineering from Purdue University and a master's in physical oceanography from Louisiana State University. Don't worry though, this presentation is not about the ocean. Matt worked on applied research topics for CIMSS, mostly with GOES-R ABI, and also enjoys user readiness training activities, education, and public outreach. And it's fitting that he works at Wisconsin, because I think Wisconsin and Purdue play tonight in basketball. So I don't know where his loyalty resides, but Matt, welcome to the Satellite Book Club.
Wow, thank you for that introduction, Jordan. Appreciate that. Yeah, you can see the title. I've got some co-authors on here. This is pretty much the whole GOES-R imagery team. And the imagery team, you know, we get to go do cool stuff, of course, like make the cool images you see on the title slide here. We're also the ones who make the images for NOAA when they do first light and they have a press release. So that's a fun part of our job. And then a less fun part of our job, if you go to the next slide, is you know, we're always looking at imagery quality and looking for problems with imagery to report back to NESDIS as what can be fixed. And then I guess, you know, I'm kind of known as a guy on the team that gets to give really goofy names to those strange anomalies. So things like shark fins, caterpillar tracks, cookie monster. You may or may not have heard of any of those things. You go to the next slide. Of course, GOES has a great history. We're on the 18th one, and I know continuity of mission is really important to the Weather Service, and we like to think we're helping with saving lives and property too with the stuff we do. So you go to the next slide. So when I put this PowerPoint together, originally it was a presentation I did at AMS. So that was like right after GOES-18 became operational. So that's a little more timely. At this point, I think probably you're all used to using it. But just a reminder that all the images that I have in here, I think, are GOES-18 when it was preliminary non-operational. prior to January 4th, unless of course it was during the interleaf period in which it wasn't, but I think that's all clear as mud to everybody. So we can go to the next slide. So this was exciting for us because this is the first time we ever had two geos or two satellites at all in the same location, with GOES-17 and 18 being both at the west location for about 6 months. And so they had the same scan strategy, so you're getting data at the same spots on Earth at the same time with the same view angles and the same spatial resolutions. And so this is a really unique chance for us to do intercalibration or cal-val with these two satellites and just see, are they measuring the same things, and how consistent are the measurements? So you go to the next slide. So these are the spectral response functions for the infrared bands on GOES-16, 17, and 18. You can see, they're super similar, but not exactly the same. So, when we get down to a detailed calibration level, how closely are these measurements going to be aligned, and how consistent are things going to be from satellite to satellite? Go to the next slide. So our team here at Wisconsin, we have a web page that we put lots of imagery out on that we use for monitoring image quality. So you can get 16 band displays on here all the time that go out in real time. And then that includes time difference imagery, like you see on the left-hand side of this slide. A lot of anomalies will show up in time difference imagery because, of course, in a 10-minute full disk or a 5-minute cone, it's not much should change meteorologically. And then if you hit next, we have a GOES statistics and images link in here too. So if you hit next too, if you were to click on that link, it would take you to a page that looks like this. So this is, in this case, this is GOES-18 versus GOES-16. It's west versus east. Someday in January, and this is the water vapor band. So you can see, we put two thumbnail images on there, and then at the bottom is a chart that's got blue asterisks that show the brightness temperature difference between 16 and 18 for a region that's about halfway between the two satellites. And this gets built throughout the day. It gets updated hourly. So we're doing, so you can, if you go on this page, there's animation you can do and look at how this builds through the day. If you go to the next slide, this just shows where the comparison area is. This goes west on the left and east on the right, and there's a red rectangle on there that shows where the comparison area is. And we just take an average brightness temperature in there and difference it, and those statistics go out every day. If you go to the next slide, what we came to talk to you about today was 18 versus 17. So when they were at the same location, that comparison area that I just showed, we're looking at the sub-satellite point. It's the same size box, but right at the sub-satellite point. And the first thing you probably might notice on here, that chart on the bottom, is there's a different line on there. There's a black line. That's the focal plane module temperature from GOES-17. When we first put this web page together, it was really just because of the issues GOES-17 had with heating and data quality and what happens when that focal plane module array heats up. And so on this particular day, it doesn't get too hot, and we're able to keep calibration actually pretty good throughout the whole day. You can see it's pretty close to 0 all day, which is pretty amazing. If you go to the next slide, these are the same kind of plots, but for the IR window bands. That's the clean window on the left, the traditional window in the middle, and the dirty window on the right. And I think, especially if you just look at like that first part of the day, like the first 6, 7, 8 hours, it's amazing how close that difference is. That blue line, it's like right on the 0 difference line. Which, I mean, I knew we would have small differences, but to me, this is super impressive how well calibrated and consistent it is throughout the day. Of course, when the focal plane module temperature starts heating up, you start seeing things get a little wonky, especially the traditional window. It doesn't have to get that hot before that one starts to get a little bit goofy. And of course, as you know, things get really bad on days where things get really hot. I'm not going to show that, but if you go to the next slide, I of course did this for all the bands. We did, we took one of the interleaf periods, November through, or the first few weeks in November, and did those kinds of statistics, only looking though at times, 0 to 7Z, which is when the focal plane module temperature is pretty stable. And then the end of the day, the last couple hours of the day, also a super stable time for the focal plane module temperature, and averaged, see what the differences are. And so that's what that table there, the middle column, the mean difference column shows. And those are really remarkably small. Other than band 16, our brightness temperature differences on average between the two satellites are between 0 and 0.2 Kelvin. And I think that's an indicator of really just how consistently well calibrated these instruments are when they're working properly. And that's a huge change from previous satellite instruments. The engineers now, they're just able to calibrate these things so well. So I think the encouraging news is as you're going from one satellite to the other, you're getting incredibly consistent measurements from those satellites these days. If you go to the next slide, that's going to be the last kind of boring looking chart. The rest of the way, we're going to just look at cool imagery and animations. I got this one from Bill Line. So it goes 17 on top, goes 18 on bottom. This is a visible band. We also, of course, I only showed results from the IR bands. Visible bands also very well calibrated and very consistent between the two. And I think you can see that here. You can't tell the difference between the two satellites in this 1 minute imagery. If you go to the next slide, same story, but this is where we did these interwoven mesos. So we had goes 17 meso and it goes 18 meso. Every 30 seconds is flipping back and forth. I think if you hold your hand over the preliminary non-operational sign flashing off and on at the bottom, you'll see you don't see any difference between the two satellites, even in 30-second animations like this, which is amazing. It shows they're both really well calibrated and also really well navigated, that you can do this. If you go to the next slide. All right, so why don't we interweave like that, goes east and goes west mesos? And yeah, if you stare at this too long, you're probably gonna get motion sickness. But yeah, the view angles, and you've all heard this before, parallax is an issue. So anytime somebody asks you, why don't we do this? Why don't we have overlapping mesos from east-west and animate them like this? This is why. The other issue sometimes it pops up is people say, why can't we replace GOES with a bunch of small sats? And you would introduce so many, parallax problems with small sats that, who wants to deal with that? You look at that's Salt Lake in the upper left-hand portion of that image, and anybody, you watch this and then ask somebody, when are the clouds over Salt Lake? Now, that's hard to tell as you watch this animation. Things move around so much between the two because of parallax. So if you go to the next slide, this is a cool animation that Bill put together. This is the eruption at Mauna Loa. And I got a lot of the ideas I got for animations from the satellite blogs. There's a satellite liaison. I'm in a room with the satellite liaisons blog is a cool blog to get a lot of cool ideas from, and the CIMSS satellite blog is also another cool blog where you can get a lot of ideas from. And Mauna Loa is, of course, the subject of a lot of those blog entries. If you go to the next image or next slide, this is then GOES 17 and 18, both looking at it at the same time. It happens to be 30-second imagery from GOES-18, but just 1 minute from 17. But they put both had mesos over it, and you can see there's just no difference between the two images other than the frequency in which the edges of that lava changes because of the 30-second imagery on the right. You go to the next slide. So where are they now? GOES-17 edition. So GOES-17 got moved to 105, which will be its storage location. This was the first image that was sent out from that location. We were able to get it here via GRB. So that's good news. If for whatever reason and something unspeakable happened and we had to pull GOES-17 out of storage and operate it, they can actually do that relatively quickly. If need be. The bad news is that if something were to happen to GOES-East or GOES-West, you might have to take GOES-17 out of storage and actually use it again. You go to the next slide. This is GOES-17 at 105 CONUS in AWIPS. So not only are we able to pull it out of storage, we'll be able to get it into AWIPS, and you'll be able to use the imagery if you have to. Thanks to Lee and the Tower S team for this image. You go to the next slide. One of the cool things we got to do with having GOES-17 at 105 is we got to look at things with 3 different ABIs at once, which is just kind of fun. So it's GOES-West on the left and GOES-East on the right, and GOES-17 at 105 in the middle. And this was another one of those things that all through February there were a bunch of blowing dust events that wound up on the various satellite blogs. So that's kind of one of the interesting imagery things going on in February. If you go to the next slide. So that's all I got today. Just take home message, GOES-18 and GOES-17 really well calibrated when GOES-17 is working properly. And it's very stable calibration between the two and very consistent. And thanks to the GOES-R program and the satellite operators and the GOES-R calibration working group for everything they did to make GOES-17 as usable as it was, as disappointing as it was actually, they got as much out of it as I think you possibly could. If you go to the next slide, I just have links to the Satellite Liaisons blog, the CIMSS satellite blog, and our imagery monitoring page. And thanks Tower S team for inviting me to speak today. I really appreciate that. That's a fun thing to get to do. So I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Matt. This is John Bonk out of National Weather Service in Portland, Oregon. And a few reminders here. So please, we ask that you stay on for the discussion, especially our field forecast offices and regional headquarters folks. And then if you don't have your actual name in the go-to login chat, when you do ask a question in the chat, we do request that you put your full name in there so we know who we're actually calling upon, especially if you're a shared office entry. And then also, Lee Byerly just placed a chat link in there for everybody to provide any feedback that you've got on this session or just the SBC in general for that. Let's see. All right, and then just a few other reminders here. 1 week from today, on Thursday, March 9th at noon Eastern, Dr. Jose Galvez from the Weather Prediction Center, WPC, will discuss demonstrating RGB usage and consecutive translation. And then we also encourage you to contact the Tower S team, Lee Byerly and Kashad Bowman, for questions about the SBC and or for configuration of satellite products in your AWIPS systems. One special note here, we do encourage offices to install that Tower S RPM version 23. If you have not already, there's going to be a change in the flow of the GLM products. So this will ensure that your site will begin receiving those 1 minute GLM products on Monday, March 6th from their new source on the Satellite Broadcast Network, SBN. And then Lee is posting a link there with more information. Okay, so with that, looking at some of the chat so far, in the chats, we do have Tim Schmidt did put in a shameless plug for a recent National Weather Association Journal of Meteorology article for parallax shift and GOES-R ABI data. And then Joe Fiore, sorry there, Joe, has mentioned that GOES-17 is technically at 104.7 west to separate it from our storage GOES-14, which is at 108.2 west. With that, folks, I don't see any immediate questions. One thing that kind of jumped out to me through Matt's presentation is at least speaking from a West Coast office, we absolutely do not miss GOES-17 in any way, shape, or fashion. So if we never see it again, we will be perfectly happy. One of the big challenges that we had was just keeping an eye on fog and stratus, especially as it forms late overnight, and trying to support some of our airports with our terminal forecasts. And just as we're wanting to see where that fog and stratus was drifting to, we'd start getting the loop heat pipe issues, and it just gets super ugly. So that's one thing that stood out to me there. While we've got it up over here, real quick, Matt, why don't you address your thoughts, any further thoughts on our storage position? And I do see we have a question in there, but we have the storage position now of GOES-17.
Yeah, if you would go to, I think it's slide 19, one maybe right before this one. Yeah, so if we were to have to operate GOES-West from, GOES-17 from this spot, I'm not sure this default CONUS sector is ideal for kind of anybody, right? Like it's not far enough east for what people using GOES-East are used to. Like I think we missed Puerto Rico, for example. And it's not far enough west for what people who are used to GOES-West are used to. You know, barely gets off the coast of California over there. So I don't know, it might be worth people requesting NESDIS if there's something they can do, or if we were gonna have to replace temporarily GOES-West with it or GOES-East with it, could CONUS be shifted one way or another instead of being, I mean, it's nicely centered, but it's just not quite ideal for either side.
Hey, this is
And
Joe Fiore. Really quickly, we're already aware of that, and as this, I think they started talking. I know Steve Superzinski and Matt Siebel are not on the call, but I'm glad you addressed that because that is starting to be discussed. You know, where would the CONUS be depending if it's needed for east or west, and would it need to be moved? And you know, so thanks for bringing that up. I just want to make you sure you're aware, so that we're thinking about that. So
that's good to hear.
So is it fair to say that this would just be more of a temporary issue until the drift can take place, though, to get it better positioned?
That's it. Probably that's all, and a lot of discussion going on about that. But yeah, so I'm sure there'll be. I mean, I know Jordan's on, and he's probably be involved eventually in talking about that. You know, the plan. So, but it might be a temporary thing.
Yeah,
all right, thank you, Joe. Oh, go ahead, Jordan.
Just to talk a little bit about that, it's always difficult to predict what kind of anomaly we would have, and certainly we hope that we would not have an issue. You know, if there's a shorter duration issue that we believe that the satellite capabilities can be recovered, then you know, we'd work with NESDIS within the first few days of an incident and determine what the path forward would be. You know, realizing for the CONUS offices, whether you're east or west, that both satellites 16 and 17 do provide coverage of your CWA. We understand for the OCONUS offices, particularly Hawaii and up in Alaska, that the loss of GOES-18 or GOES-West would be a more significant thing, and you know, we would have to decide you know, what our operational need is at that period of time. So there's not, I mean, there's a set playbook to handle these incidences, but it's exactly how we would transition between 17 and an operational satellite that experienced an unfortunate anomaly. That how that would play out is not really set in stone. Though we will note, and I'm not sure it was mentioned here, GOES-14, because of the loop heat pipe issue, we are still maintaining the previous series capability at least until the launch of and checkout of GOES-U next year. So if we had to put GOES-17 into operational service, we realized that we had at times a GOES-NOP satellite that was available to cover those times when the imagery quality was really poor. And I know, John, as you said it, forecasters got really frustrated to lose that imagery at such a core time overnight. We're still going to maintain that GOES-14 capability if we do need to rely on 17 operationally. So hopefully that provides a little more guidance on how we would handle an anomaly. And we certainly understand we'd have to get things in place as soon as we can, but there's some challenges. Want to make sure our efforts are allocated properly when we do have a spacecraft anomaly, that we're troubleshooting that operational satellite first and foremost.
All righty, thank you, Jordan. I'm going to take kind of the comments, questions a little bit out of order because I think one's going to tie into the other two. So first of all, from Galina Chirikova, will GOES-17 data from its new location be publicly available? I know that it's not available in AWIPS at the moment, but I don't know if that's a Jordan question or a Joe Fiore question, or who might be best slated to take that one.
I think I can answer that. Because it's in the storage location, it's not going to be publicly available. So, I see Scott. Well, I know you got Scott Lindstrom's question. That's a good question. I'm not an engineer, and so I know they're talking about that ground system. But as far as GOES-17, I don't think it's going to be publicly available. So,
yeah, GOES. Maybe we should just clarify to make sure people understand. So GOES-17. It's in a bit of a checkout right now through mid-March, and there are some periods where the GRB service is on. But after that period clears, assuming that 18 and 16 GOES East and West are functioning nominally, that satellite will be, if for all effective purposes for this community, off. And so there would be no imagery necessarily to share.
Right. So unfortunately, Alexander Ignatov, that folds into your question is the question of, first of all, he says, thanks, Matt, great presentation. You've shown examples when GOES-17 performs well. How do things look when GOES-17 is not so good? How do we tell when to use GOES-17 L1B safely? Is there any cumulative flag there which would say use or no use? And in short, you won't have the opportunity, it sounds like, until we have to go back live again. And then, yeah, Scott Lindstrom's question down there, how hard is it to reprogram the ground system so the CONUS sector is actually shifted? That sounded like that may be beyond anybody on this call, but I'll leave the mics open here for a moment just to see if anybody does have some insight onto that.
So
I'll just chime in. Oh, go ahead, Joe.
Go ahead. They were talking about that. I've been in on some of the GOES meetings, even though I'm more enterprise used. I still very much involved in GOES, and all those things are being talked about. So I'm sorry I stepped on somebody, but I'll let you go.
I was just gonna say on the previous question about GOES-17 data quality, and there is, when you're looking at an L1B file, there is a pixel level data quality flag that is, and we had to add this because of GOES-17, that has a, hey, focal plane module temperature is too hot, it gets a certain flag, and that's just like for the whole image, we're saying, user beware. And obviously there are times when you look at an image that it's not good, it just looks like trash. But there are times when the image actually doesn't look that bad. It still looks like planet Earth, but it might be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Kelvin off. So at that point, we have tried to flag those, but it's based on a focal plane module temperature. When it reaches a certain focal plane module temperature, and it's different for each band, it's going to say flag, every pixel gets flagged with that. So there's other metadata in there as well on the files to tell you when we think focal plane module temperature is too hot and you shouldn't be using the data for anything quantitative.
And then Matt, is that flag also now being included with the GOES East, GOES West streams?
It is. They never trigger, I mean, the GOES 16 and GOES 18 focal plane module temperatures are around 60 Kelvin, which is where we want them. And, these triggers don't go off until over 90 Kelvin. So they never get near it. But yeah, that's part of the, L1B file structure for all the ABI now.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And it looks like we do have a chat follow-up to Scott Lindstrom's, how hard is it to reprogram the ground system, et cetera. So Jessica says, Scott, I believe it would be quite an overhaul because it would also require all new navigation registration as well from the new location, but they could be wrong, just the perception from being on most, and I lose the rest of the chat there. Okay, so I've got another question that really kind of stood up, and this is going to go back to slide 8, if you could, Kashad. So it's the comparison page where we were plotting so this page, the imagery statistics. So I'm just thinking from ourselves in an operational field, would this be a quick, easy place for us to check for those data quality issues? Like if we're starting to see that the correlation difference between east and west is starting to drift from that center line. I just want a little bit more of your thoughts on this and what we should look for from an operational perspective.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. Obviously, so for one thing, the web page only gets updated every hour. So it might be that you see something odd in whatever you're looking at on the AWIP side that hasn't shown up on this page yet. But yeah, I mean, to me, at any given day or time, that blue line should be pretty flat like it is in this image. Because there are parallax issues even in the comparison area between the two, there are times when meteorology plays a role in these differences, and you'll see it sort of waver from not being as close to zero to being close to zero. I think that all has to do with how much cold cloud is moving through that scene. But it should be very smoothly varying. You shouldn't see, any big hiccups in that line. And if you do, then that's indicative that something went wrong. Chances are the something that went wrong would be like we were missing a chunk of data. That does happen every once in a while. Data gets dropped and you won't have a complete image. And if that happens to be in the comparison area, that'll show up in these statistics and it'll look off. Just while we're on the topic, I guess, anytime anybody sees anything in imagery that they think is unusual, weird, shouldn't be there, whether it's stripes or you just seeing repeated, like if you look at an animation and it just seems like it's flashing because, maybe calibration's off every other image or some weird thing like that, you absolutely reach out to us or, anybody in the calibration working group or GOES-R program. We're always happy to investigate those things and figure out if we can why they're happening, and we report those things to the calibration working group. Typically, they're able to address any kind of issues, striping, all that stuff. They can address actually really very quickly.
Oh, great, thank you. And then Lee or Tim, we've got a request to repost or post the URL for this comparison page in the chat. I think I may have seen it earlier, but it's not super obvious which link it is there. And question from Jordan Girth. On this page, how well does this show the barcode effect in band 7, if at all?
Yeah, that's a good question, Jordan. I don't think it shows it at all. The barcode effect is in just raw imagery is such a small magnitude. The level of the barcode noise is smaller really than the background noise of the band. And the way we're doing these comparisons, I'm taking a pretty big area and averaging, so that it just gets, any kind of noise basically just gets smoothed out in that averaging. So this isn't going to show the band of, the barcode effect. If you want to see the barcode effect, you can do it from this website. And it's hard for me to tell. I'm looking at this thing on a small monitor, but at the top of that web page, there's things like band and region, and we have time difference imagery just for band 7, just for GOES 16 and GOES 18. And we did that because it GOES 18 band 7 time difference imagery, barcode effect shows up really clearly. So you can go to this website and see it, but it wouldn't show up in these kind of plots. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes, and I was just trying to remember if you said that it's a single point that we're sampling, or if it's a region that's being sampled and compared. And if that's the case, does that area or point stay put, or does it get moved?
Yeah, it's a big region. It's 401 by 1001 pixels, and it stays put. It's the same every day, all day. It's halfway between the two east and west locations, centered on the equator.
All right, thank you. And then question from Galina Chirikova. Are the GOES 17 data from the transition time archived and available somewhere? Like, are they stuck in your special coffers there up at CIMSS?
Well, we for sure do have them here at the SSEC Space Science and Engineering Center, which CIMSS is a part of, has a satellite data services group, and they certainly have archived it. So I think it's probably can be made available to people. And I don't know if there may be down the road, sometimes when we do checkouts like this, sometimes that data does wind up in class. But I don't think there's sounds like there aren't plans to do that right now, but that's not out of the realm of possibility.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, typically like researchers can access that data.
Alrighty, and then I saw that Tim Schmidt did repost the link to this page, and then also further down a specific link and instructions for doing the barcode monitoring as well. We also have a comment from Lee Byerly regarding the quality flags in the L1B products, just letting us operational weather service folk know that NWS AWIPS and the sectorized cloud and moisture imagery flowing over the SBN does not contain the flags, and they aren't used in the AWIPS configuration. So it looks like they're being stripped out before they come to us. So again, this page may be our best bet if we're just kind of suspicious of something to come take a look there. All right, next comment question from Alexander Ignatov. He says, thanks, Tim. Are the time series of GOES 17, GOES 16 Delta BTs available for the full GOES 17 lifetime? We're interested in SST bands, 3.9, 8.5, 10, 11, 12 microns, and they can use those for QCing GOES 17 sea surface temperature, I presume, reprocessing.
Yeah, I'll answer that. We do have those, yeah. And actually, Alexander, you should just email Tim or me, and we can get you the text files. It's a lot of ASCII text files, but the text files that contain all that information.
All right. Okay, and then one at least let me see. Yeah, one one question here, maybe our last, depending on how long Matt wants to take on it, but I'm really interested to hear some of this. So, of all the anomalies, GOES 16, 17, 18 so far, that can really happen in our ABI imagery, what's been your favorite one so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think my favorite one is the Cookie Monster. If you go back to slide, I don't know if that's 3, Kashad. It's 2 or 3. That looks like the next one up. Yeah, the Cookie Monster, and partially because that's just a fun name to get to call something, but also because it's not really an instrument anomaly. That's a scan strategy. We don't want to look straight at the sun, so they purposely don't scan close to the edge of the Earth when the sun's back there. But when we first saw it, we didn't know that's what they were going to do. And I looked at that and I said, that looks like Cookie Monster took a bite out of the cookie. And so now when we're on, part of why it's one of my favorites too is when we're on meetings with like super serious engineers, we're talking about stuff, they still will call this Cookie Monster. They'll say, oh, we want to avoid a Cookie Monster time when we do this, or that just makes me laugh that all these really sharp scientists and engineers use the term Cookie Monster. That's pretty good.
Well, if nothing else, Matt, you've had your impact. Is there a real quick explanation as to the shark fins and caterpillar tracks that we can answer like in about a minute?
Yeah, so those are L0 packet losses. So when the data is being broadcast back down to Earth, if a packet gets dropped, then you're missing something and it goes into the remapper, and the remapper kind of does something funny with it and it comes out looking like that. So that's what I think both of those shark fins and caterpillar tracks are kind of that same root cause. It happened more in the early days of GOES-16. We don't see these very often anymore. Every once in a while you might see one. It's good to know if you do see it, that's, there's nothing wrong with your AWIPS. It's just data having a bad day.
I'll say, and me with a quick, hopefully quick answer to a nerd question. So are the data packets being transmitted horizontally, like in sequence, vertically in sequence, or how are you guys receiving them, at least up there?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not sure I can answer. I don't know if Joe is still on the line, if he can answer that.
That was just my deep nerdism out of curiosity more than anything.
Yeah, I think they're like horizontal from what I understand, but I'm not the engineer. I could bring that back from what I understand.
This is Tim Schmidt. I mean, as you know, the ABI, like a full disk, is made up of 22 swaths going from west to east. So that's all, first monitored or scanned, sent down, and the X-band calibrated, navigated, remapped, and then bounced back off the satellite. But again, it's basically a north to south, west to east as it's processed as it comes through.
All right, and if I'm getting into total nerd questions, maybe that's a sign we need to wrap up this session of the Bald Guy with Goatee Satellite Book Club. And with that, Jordan, I'll hand it back to you for closing remarks.
All right, thank you so much, John, and thank you so much, Matt, for that presentation and a really robust discussion there at the end. I really appreciated that, and hopefully the audience did as well. Yeah, we try not to match the facial features of the facilitator and the presenter, but that seemed to work out today. In any case, hope you'll come back next Thursday, March 9th at the normal time. We got Dr. Jose Galvez from the Weather Prediction Center is going to talk about demonstrating RGB usage and translation. So that should be a exciting talk. And as John had mentioned earlier, if you need any assistance with the configuration of satellite products, please talk to the folks in your office responsible for updating your RPM. If your RPM hasn't been updated with the latest and greatest for satellite, if you need any help with that, we have our Tower S team. They are standing by and willing to help. And if you have any questions about the Satellite Book Club, please feel free to get in touch with Kashad. He's willing to point you in the right direction, or maybe you want to present to us, which would be fantastic. So with that, we'll leave it there today. Once again, thanks to our presenter, our facilitator, and all of you for being with us. Take care and happy spring once again. Goodbye from Weather Service.